Severance has landed back on our screens after what could be deemed as a few years sabbatical, and boy did it clock back in with a punch. Whilst there were many moments in the episode that stood out for a number of different reasons, whether that be suspicions being raised around Helly, and also the question around the identity of Miss Huang. One thing that I thought was simply remarkable though in this episode was the opening scene, all 3 minutes and 18 seconds of it. Did you also clock that it mirrored how the opening of Season 1 was? Well, it did, but with a massive twist. So with that, I thought I'd break it down, discuss why I feel some of the decisions were made about what we saw, and also explain how it connects to the wider themes of the season. So let's get into it. Here is why Severance Season 2's opening scene is perfect. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. When it came to the opening scene of the season, we had an immediate sense of panic and confusion as it reintroduced the tone of the show and the mindset that Mark was going to be in when he woke back up in his innie form following the revelation that he had in the Season 1 finale. Hearing screams and shouting whilst we were in complete darkness, being followed by this as his first facial expression, was something which showed us that he was filled with worry, dread, fear, and that he was holding on to some kind of knowledge that he knew that he shouldn't have. It immediately laid down the foundation for the way that we're going to see the character throughout Season 2 and the overarching tone of confusion and panic that's there throughout every character. With the camera moving around him being the next thing that we saw, it almost encapsulated the many different thoughts that he was coming to terms with in these short few seconds. He was digesting everything that happened whilst he was on the outside, whilst also coming to terms with his surroundings and the fact that he was back inside of his innie form, at the workplace and trapped. He was disoriented because he didn't know how much time had passed and what kind of situation he'd be in now that he knew important details about his outie's life. The moment that he stepped out of the elevator, we saw this really impressive technique where the camera was almost moving to different diagonal positions as Mark was turning around, going to different corners of the frame. This again supported the fact that he didn't quite know what to do or where to go. Does he go to MDR and check if everybody is there and okay? Or does he look for wellness to find Miss Casey and reveal to her that she's his wife on the outside? The sharp, sudden movements supported the different decisions that he had to make, and it was almost as if the moment he started running and the camera started following him in this seamless fashion, the trigger was pulled and he embarked on his mission and journey to wellness. What followed after this was a sequence where we saw Mark running the fastest he possibly could to get to his destination. During this sequence, we saw him navigating these tight corridors where the camera was following closely behind him. This really captured the maze that workplace felt like, and it also supported the confusion that was within his mind. He got lost on multiple occasions and had to double back, take different turns, and come to a stop to think about where he was going. The exact scene that we were watching unfold was one that actually occurred in Season 1 Episode 1 of the show. However, within Season 1, we saw that the tone was drastically different. Mark had a smile on his face and he was slowly walking through the hallway without a care in the world towards MDR to start the day. So the fact that the same scene was mirrored, but with this one being one that's at a completely different pace, it showed that things were going to be a lot different throughout this season and urgency was going to be at the forefront. No longer is he the clock in and clock out zombie that only cares for work. But now, this is a character that's looking for answers and is going to be going full throttle until he gets them. The white walls in the hallway feeling like a never-ending maze was the perfect way to not only symbolize the cluttered mindset that Mark now had and him almost being lost within his own mind, but it also encapsulated that numbness that people have towards work. Workspaces often feel so uninspiring despite the fact that they want you to be inspired whilst you're there. And the white walls that are often seen inside of institutions and solitary confinement rooms that drive you to the point of insanity are the only things that he could see. No matter what way he turned, there was a feeling of claustrophobia there because every turning was so tight and the hallway was so thin. So it really made you feel that tightness whilst he was moving, and the element of not knowing where he was going was amplified even more. I'd also say that the different camera angles that were used in this scene was the right decision to make, going from being behind him to it switching to a point of view shot to us then being in front of him. It allowed us to feel like we were there with the point of view and we got to experience the disorientation that he was feeling. We got to feel like we were chasing him with the angle that was behind him, showing just how desperate he was to get to his destination because he was always just that little bit ahead. And when we were in front of him, we got to see the emotion that was on his face and the confusion that was present. No words were spoken, but his eyes and facial expressions did all of the talking, and that was most seen whilst we were in front of him. Another thing in this scene that I feel was really well utilized was the music that was playing in the background. The moment Mark pulled the trigger and started running, the music that played was almost like a phrase that was repeated over and over again. The motif was so repetitive that it almost mirrored the fact that every turning that Mark took, it just looked the same. And not only did it show that every corner was the same, but I feel like it almost connected yet again to that mindset that people have of work. The repetitive structure, all day feeling like they're doing the same thing and every day just mirroring the other, exactly like what it's like for these characters. The music did change as time went on though. For example, when Mark first laid eyes on the wellness room, the destination that he was getting lost looking for, the motif changed and it almost switched to this sound that was mirroring an alarm. And it showed us that panic was setting in for him. Because if Miss Casey was behind the door, he'd be looking at his wife and he'd need to tell her that. However, as he took steps closer to the door and he finally entered it, the mirrored alarm sound droned out and it changed to more ominous music with a real awareness of silence and space too, showing a polar opposite representation of confusion. Rather than confusion and panic being represented by endless corridors, a repeated motif of music and also running, it was instead now being shown to us with silence, space, the camera moving around the subject, and emptiness in an open space. This was because things weren't as they seemed for Mark, and he was trying to get his head around it, showing us the two different ways that the same emotion can be delivered. The fact that the wellness room had been dismantled, no longer existed, and Miss Casey was nowhere to be seen showed that there was something suspicious going on. Plus, with there being this strange figure in the background, which was of a man in the suit, it only added more suspense and made us question who it could be and why they were watching Mark in that specific moment. I'd say I also like the fact that when Mark first stepped into the wellness room, once the style of music changed, we actually got to hear a couple of his footsteps as he slowly walked in there. We didn't hear a single footstep the entire time that he was running, so there were a lot of footsteps that we should have heard, but didn't. So by hearing them in that moment, it almost allowed us to be in that room with him, and also added to the suspense that was building. For me, I think this was the standout scene in the entire episode, and there was a plethora to choose from. There was a lot to take away from the season premiere, but this was something that has been in my head since I watched the episode over the weekend. It was just choreographed so well. Hearing that this was also filmed over the course of 4 to 5 months makes it even more impressive and shows just how important it was for Stiller and the crew to make sure that this scene was done in the exact way that it was envisioned. Severance is definitely a creative show, and its camera angles and use of colours are things that hold such importance, so I'm hoping we'll see more scenes like this as the episodes go on. So, there you have it, why Severance Season 2's opening scene is perfect. If you want to see more videos on Severance Season 2 with episodes being broken down, then click on the card in the top corner, there's a playlist there. Or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find more of your favourite TV series and movies being broken down. What did you think of the opening scene? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning into the video and I'll see you in the next one.